Good evening everyone and welcome to our very special second edition of TCTV. So last week we had a look at Royal Caribbean Celebrity Cruises in Azamara, and today we're going to look at something a little bit different, and that's being Antarctica. So today we're going to be joined by our Australian General Manager Tracy Parkinson and Pat from Antarctica 21, who'll talk to you about their amazing products in Antarctica. So let's get started. We'll be joined by Tracy and Pat in just a second.
Hi, I'm delighted to be joined now by Pat from Antarctica 21 Cruises, and we're going to talk about air cruises to Antarctica, an absolutely fascinating part of the cruising industry, and I'm delighted that you are here to join us. So could you just give us a bit of an overview on this part of the world, because I don't think it's common on what you would expect, the experience you would expect to have.
Yeah, no, you're right there, Tracy, and thank you very much for having me. Antarctica is a fabulous destination. Australians have always had a close fascination with Antarctica because of our geographic proximity. But what most people don't realise is that you can actually access the most picturesque and accessible parts of Antarctica from South America, from the southern part of South America and Patagonia. And Antarctica 21 is a company that specialises in getting people to Antarctica very quickly, so they spend more time in Antarctica rather than the traditional way of getting there, which is a cruise down from Ushuaia.
So basically you would fly in and then pick up the cruise, yeah?
That's right. We fly from a little port called Punta Arenas in Chile, and that's a 2-hour flight. It only takes 2 hours from Punta Arenas to King George Island, and that's in the South Shetland Islands. And once the plane lands at King George Island, you basically have a 5-minute walk to where the Zodiacs are waiting, and then they're transferred onto the cruise ships that do a 5-day or an 8-day cruise itinerary.
And this type of cruise, what kind of customer would you say it generally appeals to?
Well, it's actually quite a broad cross-section. Generally speaking, it tends to be for 45 and over, those that have been everywhere and they're looking to add to their bucket list, so to speak, the Antarctic experience. And just to also put some framework around that, there's about 3,500 Australians that go to Antarctica every year,
wow,
which is quite a significant number. And most of that is through the South America area that I've already mentioned. There are flights that depart from Australia, but that's just an overflight. It doesn't land anywhere, and that will really you'll just see snow and ice, and then you fly back. Whereas if you do an air cruise program, you really spend time on the actual continent, seeing, touching, feeling, talking to the locals, and getting up close and personal to the natural fauna.
Okay, so give us a little insight into the locals. What would you expect to see on one of your cruises?
Well, our cruises are all very different, but on the 5 and 8 day air cruise, and again, I emphasise the air cruise because you are saving 2 days cruising if you cruise down, and that's with a 2-hour flight. As soon as we depart, we take off to the southernmost point of where we typically sail to. But every day we move to a different location, and each location has different attractions. So, of course, we're going to see whales, we're going to see penguins, we're going to see seals, but there's also opportunities to see different bases. There are a lot of bases in Antarctica. So there are Chilean bases, there's a Russian base, there's a Chinese base, there's an English base. In fact, the English base is the most popular base that we visit because that's where you get your passport stamped.
Ah.
So even Antarctica isn't actually a country per se that it's got its own nationality. We do have that quirky experience there, and a lot of people take this up where they go to Port Lockroy is the name, where they have their passport stamped to say that they've been to Antarctica.
Excellent, and that's always good.
It's always good, and it's something they can go back and show their friends. And we find that word of mouth is very important for Antarctica. Antarctica has a mystique about it, and a lot of people don't realise how big the continent is. And for me to explain to you, it's probably the easiest way to tell you how big it is in terms of width is if you look at Australia from its western point to eastern point, then if you have two Australias side by side, then you still wouldn't fit that in Antarctica at its widest point. That's how big it is. So the area that we focus on is that Antarctica archipelago just south of South America. And there we find that everything is accessible. And the good thing is that where we sail in, it's all protected by small islands. So it's very safe. So that's something else that people are always asking us. Is it safe to go? Generally speaking, it is. There's no rough weather. There could be some inclement weather in terms of being able to land, and so that's what we need to build into our itineraries, our contingency if that happens. But generally speaking, we can fly there through the season being November through to early March.
Okay.
It's our summer, basically.
So that's the best time to actually travel.
Well, it's really the only time with our model because of the airstrip that we use. That airstrip in the winter is not accessible because the ice covers it.
Okay, so give us a little insight because the ships that you use, I would presume that it's a bit rough and ready. We're going on an expedition kind of thing, but it's not. It's
not, and that's another misconception that I'm happy to address today. We have two ships that we use. One is a Danish-built ship called the Ocean Nova. It was built in 1992. And the other one is called the Sea Explorer, and that was built in 1997 in Italy. So very modern by contemporary terms, but it's purposely built for this type of activity. So they have to be classified as ice category ships. In other words, their hulls have to be reinforced, and they're not ice breakers. That's a totally different type of ship that go in and actually physically break the ice and rescue ships that are being stuck a little bit further in. But these are ice category ships that can comfortably sail within the little archipelagos throughout the areas that we visit. But both ships are very clean and comfortable. One, if you like, the Ocean Nova is like a 4-star if you want to rate it to a hotel, and the Sea Explorer is a 5-star. And the Sea Explorer provides that more extra pampering along the way, and that one tends to be very popular with some of our clients.
Okay. So what kind of experience would you expect to have on board the ship? What kind of entertainment is provided, that kind of thing?
Well, it's not a Mediterranean cruise, it's not a Caribbean cruise, and it's not a South Pacific cruise or a Southeast Asia cruise. This is an expeditionary type cruise, so most of the passengers that are on the ship are not there for the ship experience. They're using it more like a hotel room. They're more interested in getting off the ship. But having said that, every passenger has its own, in their cabins have their own private ensuite. All the meals are all included as part of the package. And during the meals, we include beverages as well as part of that package. So we do look after them from a food and beverage point of view. But certainly what they're looking for is the amount of time off the ship. So every day, what happens after breakfast is we will disembark the passengers. And this is the other good thing about Antarctica 21 is that because we're a small ship experience, there's only 70-odd passengers. We can get everyone off very quickly and everyone back on very quickly, meaning we don't have to have half the ship go on and half stay on. Everyone can go off at the same destination. And typically what will happen is for 2 or 3 hours, the passengers will go and explore that area that they're in. With our polar guides, we have 12 to 14 polar guides, depending on the ship. The polar guides are there as a resource for them to ask questions, anything they want to know. But also having polar guides, they're not there to hold your hand along the way. They're there just as a backup. We find that there are a lot of photographers that want to go on these cruises because they want to get imageries of, the penguins or the seals, and they like to be left alone. They don't want people around them, so we allow for that. So every day, after breakfast, we will disembark. We'll do 3 hours in one location. We'll come back and we'll have lunch, and then the captain will move the ship slightly, and then we'll do a different location in the afternoon. And that's typically what we do over the 5 to 8 days. But on top of that, there are excursions that they can do as well, which needs to be pre-booked. They can do kayaking and they can do snowshoeing and hiking as well. So kayaking, we would recommend that you have a little bit of experience because without that, the kayak master would probably say, no, that's not for you. Not that the water's rough, it's more for safety. because the water is quite cold. So should anything untoward happen, let's say, you tipped over, you've really got to know what to do to tip back. But that never happens, but it's just in case. And the other one, the snowshoeing and hiking, is a little bit more soft adventure, and as the name suggests, you go walking into the snow and ice, and that's a good experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we have had some questions come in. So
Yes.
Joanne from Queensland is asking, how long does it take to get there?
Well, it's a 2-hour flight, so that's the
Okay.
beauty of it.
So a 2-hour flight from
Punta Arenas.
Okay.
So in Chile, if you fly into Santiago, that's the capital, that's the gateway. There are daily flights, 7 or 8 times a day from Santiago to Punta Arenas. And when you arrive in Punta Arenas, the Antarctica 21 crew are waiting for you at the airport and will transfer you to the hotel. And that needs to happen before 3 o'clock that day, because after 3 o'clock on day one, we then do a briefing with our clients that are going on the next departure. We then size up our boots, and then we have a team dinner, and then we overnight in the hotel. So that's part of the package. The next morning, the passengers or clients will go to the airport for their 2-hour flight to King George Island, but they're already kitted up with all the gear on, because once they land, there's no Qantas Club, there's no hotel for them to go to. They really need to be fully dressed, boots on, and away they walk to the Zodiacs, and they're on the ship. So we do the sailings, as I've already described, and then the same thing happens on the way back, where we go back, and then the plane arrives with a new group, and then the old group walk back and then and head back to Punta Arenas, where they have an extra night, one last night at the hotel, and then the next morning we'll take them to the airport as a transfer. At all times, you've got Antarctica 21 staff with you from the moment they arrive to the moment we take them back to the airport.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So your travel counsellor would be able to organise the whole trip from leaving Melbourne right to getting onto the ship. So we will be able to help you with booking everything. So that's great. Barry from Sydney has messaged in, and you kind of answered this a little bit, but I will just ask the question. So do you need special clothing for this kind of holiday?
Well, you do, Tracy. It's extreme weather down in Antarctica. So the good thing is that if passengers don't have any special equipment or gear, they can actually hire all that, and it may be more cost effective for them to do that. And we send out a link that has a listing of all the things they can hire, or they may want to borrow from some friends. But you can do that before. You can even do that while you're on the ship as well. We have a shop on the ship where customers can buy equipment and or clothing if they haven't brought their own. One of the other restrictions that we do have is the flight from Punta Arenas to King George. That only has a 20 kilogram allowance. So if you have passengers traveling with more than that, they can leave the extra luggage at the hotel and collect it on the way back as well.
Okay, that's great to know. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's an amazing part of the world, and I think something that we don't all know an awful lot about. But hopefully we have ignited a little bit of interest there for you. And if you do want any more information, please do contact your travel counsellor, who will be able to research it for you. So thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you,
and
Tracy.
we shall see you soon.
Thank you.
So thanks to Tracy and Pat for that very interesting insight into what is Antarctica, an amazing untouched destination that I'm sure you'll all love to be able to get out and enjoy. So if you do have any questions, please be sure to drop us a line, and we look forward to seeing you next week for our third show, 7:30 Eastern States Time. Thanks for joining us.